You have been fasting for a few hours. At first, everything feels normal. Then your stomach begins to growl. Your head feels slightly light. Your energy drops, and a quiet discomfort starts to settle in. And then the question appears, is this actually working? Or am I hurting my body? This is the exact moment when many people give up. Not because fasting does not work, but because the first signals from the body are easy to misunderstand. Most of us are used to constant comfort. We eat when we feel hungry. We eat when we feel bored. Sometimes we even eat when we simply feel low on energy. Because of this habit, the moment discomfort appears, we assume that something must be wrong. But biology often tells a different story. What feels like a problem may actually be the first sign that your body is shifting into a completely different mode of operation, a mode that humans evolved to use during times when food was not always available. In other words, the strange sensations you feel during the early hours of fasting are not necessarily signs of danger. They may be the first signals that your metabolism is beginning to change. When you eat, your body runs on a very familiar fuel, glucose. This simple sugar, which comes from the food you eat, becomes the main source of energy for almost every cell in your body. Some of that glucose is used immediately. It powers your muscles, your brain, and the countless processes happening inside you every second. But your body is also preparing for the future. Not all of that energy is used right away. A portion is carefully stored in the liver and muscles in a form called glycogen. You can think of glycogen as a kind of biological backup battery. It allows your body to keep functioning normally even when you have not eaten your next meal yet. However, like any battery, this reserve does not last forever. For most people, glycogen stores can support the body for roughly 10 to 12 hours. After that point, those reserves begin to run low. And this is where something remarkable happens. Your body does not panic. It does not shut down. Instead, it activates a survival program that has existed for hundreds of thousands of years. When glycogen starts to run out, your metabolism begins to shift. Instead of relying mainly on sugar, your body starts looking inward for another source of energy. Body fat. Stored fat becomes the new fuel supply. The liver begins converting fat into molecules that can be used for energy, allowing your body to continue functioning even without incoming food. Scientists call this moment the metabolic switch. It is the point where the body transitions from burning sugar to burning fat. And many of the strange sensations people experience during fasting begin right here, during this transition. Your body is not failing. It is adapting. But once this metabolic shift begins, another experience often appears: hunger. And this is where many people become confused. Most of us assume that the longer we fast, the hungrier we should feel. It seems logical. No food should mean steadily increasing hunger. But the human body does not work that way. Hunger does not rise in a straight line. Instead, it arrives in waves. These waves are largely controlled by a hormone called ghrelin, often referred to as the hunger hormone. But ghrelin does not simply climb higher the longer you go without eating. It follows a rhythm your body has learned over time. If you normally eat lunch at noon, ghrelin tends to rise around that hour. If you usually eat dinner in the evening, it rises again later in the day. Your body is not reacting to the actual absence of food, as much as it is reacting to the schedule it has become familiar with. What makes this even more interesting is what happens after each peak. Ghrelin does not stay high forever. Even if you do not eat, the hormone begins to fall again after a short period of time. This means you might feel a strong wave of hunger that seems almost impossible to ignore, only to notice that 30 minutes later, it has faded. The hunger did not disappear because you ate. It disappeared because the hormonal signal passed. This is why many people are surprised during fasting. They expect hunger to grow constantly, yet instead they experience short bursts that come and go. And when you understand this pattern, something important becomes clear. Those waves of hunger are not signs that your body is failing. They are signs that your internal energy regulation system is working exactly as it should. As the body continues adapting to fasting, some changes begin to appear that people often find surprising. One of the most noticeable can show up in something as simple as your breath. When your body starts using stored fat for fuel, the liver converts that fat into molecules called ketones. These ketones act as an alternative energy source, helping power the brain and other organs when glucose is no longer the primary fuel. Among these molecules is one called acetone. Unlike many other compounds produced in the body, acetone is volatile. That means it can leave the body through your breath. For some people, this creates a faint metallic or slightly sweet smell when they exhale. It can feel strange at first, and many people worry that something is wrong. But in reality, this change in breath is not a warning sign. It is evidence that the body has begun using fat as its main source of energy. In other words, the metabolic transition that began earlier is now becoming more active. Around the same time, another sensation often appears, a subtle feeling of cold. Many people notice that their hands or feet feel cooler during fasting. At first glance, it may seem like the body is running out of energy. But the explanation is different. When you eat, digestion itself produces heat. Your body is actively processing food, moving nutrients, and generating thermal energy. During fasting, that constant digestive activity stops. At the same time, insulin levels drop, and the body shifts into a more energy-efficient mode. Resources are directed toward the organs that are most essential for survival: the brain, the heart, the liver. Because of this prioritization, less blood flow is sent to the extremities. Hands and feet may feel cooler, even though the core systems of the body are functioning normally. What feels like a loss of energy is actually a sign that your body is reorganizing how it uses its resources. It is adapting to a different fuel system. As these changes continue, another phase often appears. For many people, this is the moment when fasting feels the most challenging, a sudden wave of fatigue. During the early stage of fasting, your body is losing access to the fuel it has relied on for most of your life. Glucose, the quick energy that normally comes from food, is no longer arriving on schedule, but the system that burns fat is still warming up. Your metabolism is shifting, but it is not fully adapted yet. And during this transition, it can feel as if your energy has temporarily disappeared. You may feel slower than usual. Simple tasks can seem harder. Motivation may drop, even for things that normally feel easy. This stage can be confusing because it creates the impression that the body is weakening. But what is actually happening is more like an engine switching from one type of fuel to another. For a short time, the system runs less smoothly while the new fuel source takes over. And then something interesting begins to happen. As the body becomes more efficient at using fat, the liver produces ketones more consistently. These molecules begin supplying a steady stream of energy, especially to the brain. Unlike glucose, which often rises and falls depending on meals and carbohydrates, ketones tend to provide a more stable fuel supply. Many people start to notice a shift. The heavy afternoon fatigue disappears. Energy no longer spikes and crashes throughout the day. Instead, it becomes calmer, steadier, and more predictable. At the same time, the body increases the production of growth hormone. This hormone plays an important role in protecting muscle tissue and supporting fat metabolism. So rather than breaking down muscle, the body prioritizes stored fat as its main energy source. What began as a period of fatigue gradually turns into something else entirely, a more stable and sustained form of energy. As the body becomes more comfortable using fat as its primary fuel, the most surprising changes begin to appear in a place many people do not expect: the brain. Your brain is one of the most energy-demanding organs in the body. Even though it represents only a small percentage of your total body weight, it consumes roughly 20% of your total energy. Under normal conditions, the brain relies heavily on glucose. It is used to receiving a steady supply of sugar from the food you eat. But during fasting, something remarkable happens. As fat metabolism increases, the liver produces more ketones. These molecules are small enough to cross the blood-brain barrier, the protective filter that regulates what enters the brain. Once ketones reach the brain, they can be used as a powerful and stable source of energy. This is when many people notice an unexpected shift. At first, there may have been a brief period of mental fog while the brain adjusted to the change in fuel. But once ketones become available, the mind often begins to feel clearer. Thoughts become sharper. Concentration improves. The heavy, sluggish feeling that sometimes appears after large meals begins to disappear. Instead of energy rising and falling throughout the day, the brain receives a more constant supply of fuel. And alongside ketones, another important change begins to take place inside the brain. The production of a molecule called BDNF begins to increase. BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor. While the name may sound technical, its role is deeply important. This protein helps protect neurons and supports the formation of new connections between brain cells. These connections are essential for learning, memory, and the brain's ability to adapt and grow over time. Both fasting and physical exercise are known to stimulate the production of BDNF. When the two are combined, the effect can become even stronger. From an evolutionary perspective, this makes perfect sense. When our ancestors had not eaten for a while, the brain could not afford to become slow or unfocused. On the contrary, it needed to become sharper and more alert in order to find food and respond quickly to the environment. That ancient survival mechanism is still present today. And when the brain begins operating efficiently on ketones, many people experience a sense of mental clarity that they did not expect. After the body and brain have adapted to this new fuel system, another change often appears. And for many people, it is the most surprising one. The hunger begins to fade. At first, this seems almost impossible. Most people expect the opposite. They imagine that the longer they go without food, the stronger the hunger will become. But after roughly 24 hours of fasting, many people notice something different. The intense urge to eat begins to calm down. Part of this happens because the hormone ghrelin starts to stabilize. Earlier in the process, ghrelin created those strong waves of hunger that came and went throughout the day. But as the body adjusts to the new metabolic state, those signals become less urgent. At the same time, ketones begin to play another important role. Beyond providing energy, ketones also have a natural appetite-suppressing effect. When your body can draw a steady supply of fuel from stored fat, it no longer needs to send emergency messages demanding food. Energy is available, the system is running, and the sense of constant urgency begins to disappear. Hunger does not vanish completely, but it becomes quieter, more predictable, and much easier to manage. When you step back and look at the entire process, a clear pattern emerges. The waves of hunger, the change in breath, the cooler hands and feet, the brief fatigue followed by stable energy, the sharper thinking and improved focus, and finally, the fading intensity of hunger. These are not random sensations. They are signs that the body is adjusting to a different metabolic state. Fasting is not simply something the body endures. It is a process the human body was designed to handle. And when you recognize these signals, the experience begins to make much more sense.